WFYI podcasts are brought to you by TechPoint, presenting the 25th Annual Best of Tech Mira Awards, recognizing digital innovation across Indiana, April 26th at Old National Center. More, including how to nominate, at miraawards.com.
This is WFYI News Now. It's January 4th, and I'm Darian Benson. On today's show, new data on high school graduation rates across the state, where $18 million meant to support childcare programs is headed, how to avoid employment scams when you're looking for a job, and a fight over water rights in Indiana is now attracting national attention.
Across the region, we've seen a flurry of cities pass resolutions opposing the pipeline project, citing a need to protect their local water resources.
Those stories coming up, but first, more changes at the Museum of Art at Newfields. 2 new members were added in recent leadership shifts at the museum after the Board of Trustees lost another member last month. Indianapolis banker Jason Noyen is no longer on the board. New members Robert Schell, vice president at a financial firm, and Leon Jackson, CEO at the Diversity and Leadership Program, have joined the museum's governing board. The changes come after a flurry of resignations at the museum, starting with the unexplained departure of Newfields CEO Colette Burnett last year. More Indiana students graduated from high school in 2023 than the year before, but as Eric Weddle reports, the new graduation rate lags behind the highest percent a decade ago.
In 2014, 90% of Indiana high school students earned a diploma from public and private schools. Since then, the graduate rate dropped, and now it's nearly recovered. Last year, 88.9% of students earned a diploma, according to data just released by the Indiana Department of Education. That number also includes students who graduated with a waiver, meaning they did not pass or complete a requirement. The graduation rate for students without a waiver was a little bit lower, at nearly 85%. And students with disabilities had the largest graduation rate increase from the previous year, an improvement of nearly 7 percentage points. I'm Eric Weddle.
To find the graduation rate at your high school, go to WFYI.org. The Indiana Family and Social Services Administration is awarding $18.1 million in child care grants to a total of 64 employers. The money from federal COVID relief funds will help employers set up and expand on-site child care programs for their workers, reserve seats in local child care programs, and offer tuition benefits, among other options. Courtney Penn is director of the Office of Early Childhood and Out-of-School Learning at the FSSA. She says the program will help employers attract better applicants and support existing workers.
I have never seen it in my 23 years in early care and education, and so this is a really great win for not only children and families in our state, but also the field of early care and education to really be seen as a contender.
Governor Eric Holcomb announced the program as part of the 2023 Next Level Agenda, which he focused on education, workforce and community development, and public health. The recipients include Indiana and Purdue universities, school corporations, and manufacturers around the state. Indiana Public Broadcasting takes questions from listeners online, and one listener wants to know how Hoosiers can avoid employment scams when looking for jobs online. Violet Comber-Weiland reports there are several red flags Hoosiers can look out for to steer clear of employment scams.
Heather Clary is a spokesperson with the Better Business Bureau of Greater Kentucky and South Central Indiana. Clary says since the pandemic, many more applicants are looking for remote work, which may make Hoosiers more susceptible to job scams. She says one of the biggest warning signs to watch out for when looking for jobs is employers who draw you away from company sites or don't want to chat face-to-face.
If they don't want to talk to you on the telephone or via some video chat like Zoom, that can be a red flag. Most employers are going to want to speak to you and hear you speaking to them and answering their questions.
She says other red flags may include jobs that don't ask for references and tax forms, or jobs that promise large salaries for little work. Clary says the BBB has a list of reputable businesses and charities on its website consumers can check while searching for jobs and companies. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Violet Comber-Weiland.
And for our final story today, protecting water rights was not a hot-button issue in Indiana until recently. Aubriana Heron spoke with reporter Ben Thorpe about why Central Indiana residents have their eyes on the legislative session to see if lawmakers create potential safeguards to help regions keep their water in place.
So, Ben, let's talk about why residents and some lawmakers are pushing for water protections during this upcoming session.
Yeah, to explain that, we kind of first need to talk about a large industrial complex that the state is hoping to build in Lebanon. The state, through a kind of quasi-governmental agency called the Indiana Economic Development Corporation, has been working to attract large industrial projects such as semiconductor chip manufacturers. But those kinds of projects, as you might understand, all require a lot of water.
Okay, so where's that water coming from?
Okay, so this is basically the problem. Indiana as a state is a very water-rich, but Lebanon itself doesn't have enough water to support the kinds of projects that this state is hoping to attract. So the state has been looking elsewhere for potential sources of water, and one of the places that they've landed on was Tippecanoe County. The state is in the process of studying water resources there and has proposed a roughly 35-mile pipeline that could bring water from the area down to Lebanon. Some estimates have been that the state would be moving about 100 million gallons of water every day.
All right, so how have local residents responded to those potential plans?
Well, as you can imagine, locals have not been happy. Across the region, we've seen a flurry of cities pass resolutions opposing the pipeline project, citing a need to protect their local water resources. In Tippecanoe County, commissioners passed an ordinance that would block large water withdrawals for the next 9 months. Basically, they're trying to stop the pipeline from moving forward. They say that they're hopeful that within that 9-month period, the legislature can pass water protections that will at least ensure that these kinds of massive withdrawals won't come at the expense of local residents.
I guess maybe it's worth asking what kind of protections do exist.
So at this point, not much. There are no requirements on the books that these kinds of large withdrawals even need to be studied beforehand. In fact, some lawmakers have basically told me that until the withdrawals have been demonstrated to cause harm, there's nothing that can be done. And they say, so, at that point, it's already too late.
So can we expect some legislation out of this upcoming session?
It's not really clear at this point. There are lawmakers representing Tippecanoe County who plan on introducing legislation, and leadership has kind of said that they're open to seeing those bills introduced, but it's not clear yet what could or might pass through the legislature.
What has been the impact of the local opposition? Anything?
I would say that there's actually been a pretty big impact to this opposition. Governor Holcomb met with Tippecanoe County officials just last week and agreed not to move forward with the pipeline until a regional study could be completed. He also said that a pipeline would have to be approved by the legislature, and we know that that's not going to happen during this next session. We're also seeing a lot of increased scrutiny of the IEDC overall. At a budget meeting recently, lawmakers grilled the corporation about its large expenditures and basically said, we feel like there's not enough oversight of this corporation.
So I guess we'll see what comes out of this next session.
Aubriana, I think a lot of people are going to be watching this next session really closely.
Thank you so much, Ben.
Thank you.
That's all for today's episode of WFYI News Now. Our podcast is produced by the following people who live in your community: Aubriana Heron, Drew Dodlin, Kendall Antron, who composed the music for this podcast, and me, Darian Benson. Our news director is Sarah Neal Estes. If you like today's episode, remember to subscribe and share, and follow WFYI on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube to check in on our newsroom throughout the day. Thanks for listening. We'll be back tomorrow.
WFYI podcasts are brought to you by TechPoint, presenting the 25th Annual Best of Tech Mira Awards, recognizing digital innovation across Indiana, April 26th at Old National Center. More, including how to nominate, at miraawards.com.